Evelyn Ev Hayes knew the night shift at St. Raphael's Surgical Recovery Unit, or SRU, in Boston, Massachusetts, was where sanity went to die. She was a nursing student, and the pay differential for the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift was the only thing keeping her tuition afloat. The SRU was located on the 5th floor, a serpentine corridor of 42 mostly empty rooms. After the city traffic noise died down, the entire wing felt less like a modern medical center and more like a mausoleum. Tonight, Tuesday, was a ghost town. Her charge nurse, a woman named Brenda, whose eyes always seemed to be watching two places at once, was predictably asleep in the break room. Ev was alone with 6 heavily sedated patients, all stable, all quiet. The dread started around 2:15 a.m. It wasn't loud, like a code blue. It was a sound that defied the hospital's silence, a faint, fast, rhythmic beep, 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 the unmistakable sound of a cardiac monitor flatlining. The flatline sound should have triggered the massive, blaring central station alarm. Yet Ev's console was calm. The green wave patterns of her 6 patients pulsed steadily. The sound was localized, internal, and seemed to leak from a heavy, steel-gray door at the end of the hall marked West Wing Storage Decommissioned. This wing had been sealed off for years. Ev initially dismissed it as fatigue, but at 3 a.m., the beeping returned, accompanied by a razor-sharp, acrid scent, ozone and burning iodine, the smell of a machine short-circuiting amidst a sudden, catastrophic surgical failure. Driven by her nurse's training, which trumped every instinct screaming at her to run, she took a deep breath and slid her badge into the West Wing door's reader. The lock mechanism protested with a loud, grinding complaint. The door hissed open, revealing a vacuum of stale air and shadows. She stepped inside, her penlight carving a narrow path through the dust. This side of the floor was stripped bare, but the scent and the beep, beep, beep pulled her down a narrow, tile-lined offshoot she had never seen on any floor plan. The hall ended abruptly at a dusty, antique nurse's station, dimly lit by a sickly red exit sign. On the counter sat an ancient vinyl logbook. She opened it. The entries ended 3 years prior, the day the wing closed. But the very last page, startlingly clean, held one fresh, block-typed line. Room 517, A-Do. Admission, unscheduled delivery. Status, critical. 517 doesn't exist, Ev whispered, her blood turning to ice. The SRU ended at 5:15. The flatline sound was now deafening, originating from the room directly behind the desk. A brass plaque on the door read, "Delivery Suite 2." Ev pushed the door open. The room was a horrifying tableau of abandonment. Rusted metal, stained tiles, and a single filthy delivery bed. On a plastic-wrapped cart sat a decades-old fetal monitor. Its screen was cracked, but it was alive. It showed a single, violent, spiking waveform, a heart rate of nearly 300 BPM, impossible for life, before the line vanished, replaced by the terrible rhythmic beep, beep, beep of a complete flatline. Ev scrambled backwards, stumbling against the stainless steel scrub sink. She needed to get back to the main hall, but when she looked, the metal door had vanished. Where it should have been, there was only a solid, blood-stained wall of tile. She was sealed in the delivery suite. Schlick, schlick. The sound was low and wet, dragging itself across the room. She knew it wasn't metal. It was organic. The creature. A-Do. A small, high-pitched sniff echoed directly in front of her. She couldn't see it, but she felt the change in the air pressure as something wet and immense inhaled nearby. Ev's hand found a heavy, rusted IV pole, and she swung blindly. The pole connected with something yielding but dense, resulting in a high, terrible wail that sounded like a child screaming underwater. Then, the final absolute terror. The room's intercom system crackled to life. The speaker right above her head. It was Brenda's voice, sickly sweet and utterly wrong. "Nurse Hayes, you're exactly where you need to be. Room 517 is hungry tonight. We always need fresh nursing stock for the nursery, dear." A wet, fleshy thump hit the wall of the room. She could see it now in the brief flash of her penlight before it died. A low, pale, amorphous mass of glistening fetal tissue dragging itself with dozens of splintered skeletal protrusions. It had no eyes, only a central, constantly pulsing maw. Ev threw the dead penlight at the creature, turned, and slammed her shoulder into the tile wall where the door had been. She didn't break the tile, but she hit a recessed lock. With a grinding sound, a section of the wall popped inward, revealing a gap, the floor's deep utility shaft, a black vertical drop into the hospital's sub-basement. She lunged toward the shaft opening, but a strong, rough hand clamped over her mouth and throat. The scent of stale coffee and cheap perfume filled her nostrils. Brenda, the charge nurse, hadn't been sleeping. She had been waiting in the hall of the West Wing. "Don't worry, sweetie," Brenda whispered, her grip crushing Ev's trachea, pulling her back toward the pulsing mass of dough. 517 doesn't like pre-packaged meals. It prefers its nurses, freshly delivered. The thing from room 517 emitted a rhythmic, wet, guttural thump, 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 the terrifying rhythm of its diseased heart. Ev's final, fading thought, before the dark swallowed her, was the sound of its many sharp, enamel-white teeth clicking together, getting ready for the feast.
Nathaniel Miller, Nate, was not afraid of doctors. He was terrified of being helpless. It was the reason he delayed his routine arthroscopic knee repair for 6 months at the Texas Medical Center in Dallas. But here he was now, sprawled on the operating table, the blinding surgical lights creating sundogs behind his eyelids. "Relax, Mr. Miller. We're going to give you a lovely nap now," the anesthesiologist, Dr. Vance, said with a cheerful, clipped professionalism that did little to ease Nate's anxiety. Nate tried to respond, to ask for confirmation that the awareness, the terrifying, rare side effect where paralysis sets in but consciousness remains, was truly impossible. But before he could form the words, a cool liquid rushed into his vein. He felt the rapid, liquid cold of the paralytic agent hitting his major muscle groups first, his legs, his arms, his core. His vision blurred, the room swimming in neon green and sterile white. The last conscious sensation was the heavy, cottony fog enveloping his brain, promising the deep, empty sleep he desperately craved. Then the fog broke. Nate's eyelids were sealed shut, but his mind was crystal clear. He was still there. He couldn't feel the table, his knee, or the scratchy sheet beneath him. He was a disembodied consciousness trapped inside a meat shell. He tried to twitch a finger, to flutter an eyelid, to make a sound, but his entire nervous system was a dead wire. He was completely, irrevocably paralyzed. Anesthesia awareness. The 1 in 1,000 horror story he'd read about was happening to him. He could hear everything. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor was a constant, mocking metronome. He could hear the low, metallic hum of the ventilation system and the muffled squeak of the surgeon's shoes on the polished floor. "All right, incision site prepped," a new voice, Dr. Chen, said coolly. "Scalpel, please?" Nate tried to scream. He forced every iota of willpower toward his larynx, but the sound died, choked off by the paralyzing agent, leaving only a violent internal echo of terror. The surgeons began to chat, not about Nate, but about weekend plans. He was nothing more than an object on the table, a piece of meat to be addressed while they discussed golf scores and car payments. The complete indifference was a fresh layer of terror. Then Dr. Vance chuckled. "Dr. Chen, before you start carving up that meniscus, check the board again. I think there was a last-minute change. I had 3 Miller procedures today." A brief, unsettling silence fell over the room. Nate's heart monitor began to spike, its beeps accelerating wildly, a panic alarm only he could hear. "Wait a minute," Dr. Chen said, his voice now flat, devoid of its earlier easygoing tone. "The chart is Nathaniel Miller, 42, arthroscopic knee repair. That's what's prepped." No, I just ran the final pathology slip. The Nathaniel Miller you're looking for, the one for the knee, was already done on table C by Dr. Patel. This patient is Nate Miller, 33, and his procedure is marked in red. A plastic-gloved hand landed heavily on Nate's forehead, followed by a gasp. "Wait a minute. This patient is prepped for a spinal fusion, L4, L5. Wrong side, wrong table, wrong procedure. Quiet." Dr. Chen snapped, his voice a low, furious whisper. "The clock is running, and the fusion patient is already under. If we wake this one now, we have a catastrophic error on our hands. The legal liability." He trailed off, the implicit threat hanging heavy in the sterile air. Nate's internal terror hit a crescendo. Spinal fusion, major surgery, and he was conscious. He was about to be cut open for a procedure he didn't need, and he couldn't move a muscle, couldn't even weep. "What are we going to do, doctor?" Vance's voice was barely a breath. A long, agonizing silence stretched, interrupted only by the steady, accelerating beep, beep, beep of Nate's desperate heart. "He's completely paralyzed," Dr. Chen said, flat and clinical, as if talking about an obsolete piece of equipment. "He can't move, he can't speak, he can't tell anyone." The squeak of a surgical cart being rolled closer, a sound of metal instruments clinking. Nate knew what was happening. They were going to proceed with the wrong surgery to cover the mistake. He would be conscious for the entire agonizing ordeal. "No," Dr. Chen commanded, his voice now cold steel. "Not the back. We can't leave a visible error. Check his chart again. He's listed as a registered organ donor." Nate's internal scream became a silent, violent prayer. "Scalpel," Dr. Chen repeated, not to his assistant, but to the silence. "We make an abdominal incision. We fix the problem with the records later. We take what we need, and nobody ever knows." A blinding white light suddenly seemed to fill Nate's peripheral vision as the focused beam of the overhead lamp descended. He could feel the shadow of the surgeon, huge and terrifying, standing over him. The air thickened. He heard the faint, high-pitched sheen of metal on metal, the sound of a scalpel being tapped against a sterile tray. The final sound Nate Miller's conscious mind registered was the gentle, cool pressure of the sterilized steel touching his skin, right above his stomach, followed by the terrifying, searing realization that he could feel everything. The heart monitor continued its frantic, meaningless beep, 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 beep. A cry heard by no one.
Vance hated the overnight shift in the emergency department of Mercy West Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. It wasn't the hours. It was the quiet anticipation that something truly terrible was always about to burst through the automated doors. Tonight, that terrible thing arrived shortly after 3 a.m. The doors hissed open, and a man stumbled in, not bleeding or clutching his chest, but swaying like a marionette with clipped strings. He was mid-30s, dressed in a stained blue worker's uniform and covered head to toe in a fine, powdery gray dust. His skin, even under the harsh fluorescent lights, was unnervingly pale. "Name? What happened?" Elias asked, meeting the man at the triage desk. The man didn't answer. He just held out his hands, palms up. They weren't sweaty. They were perfectly dry, the skin thin and brittle like parchment stretched over bone. "Sir, I need you to talk to me," Elias pressed. The man tilted his head. It was a jerky, unnatural movement, and Elias saw it then, the subtle shift in the man's physical architecture. Where his throat should have been, the skin was pulling tight, revealing the cartilaginous rings of the trachea, which seemed to be extending slightly, like segments of an insect's antenna. "Isolation room 3, now!" Elias barked to the charge nurse, Maria, pushing the man gently toward the nearest curtained bay. As they guided him, the man suddenly collapsed. He didn't fall like a person fainting. He crumpled like a clay figure dropped from a height. A faint, sickening crackle emanated from his limbs. "Vance, his core temp is 40 degrees Celsius, Maria gasped, checking the monitor. "That's over 104! Elias peeled the man's shirt back to check his chest, and his training immediately disintegrated into raw terror. Across the man's sternum, the skin wasn't inflamed. It was moving. Small, intricate ridges were forming, creating a pattern that resembled a series of tiny, symmetrical, segmented carapaces. "This isn't a fever. This is structural," Elias whispered, stepping back. "Get security. Clear the floor. We need hazmat now." But it was already too late. The man on the gurney suddenly sat up, bolt upright. His eyes, previously glazed over, snapped wide open, revealing irises that had turned a shocking, glossy black. His jaws unlocked, opening far wider than a human mouth should, and he emitted not a scream, but a sound like 100 tiny glass beads being rattled violently in a container. Two paramedics who were processing paperwork froze, clutching their heads. They dropped to their knees, writhing. Their shirts instantly soaked through with sweat, the smell of ozone and burned sugar filling the ED. In seconds, their pale skin began to bubble, and they started to claw frantically at their own faces, as if trying to tear away a mask. "Seal the ED," Elias yelled, scrambling for the main entrance lockdown button. He slammed his hand down, and with a heavy final clunk, the automatic glass doors slid shut, sealing the department off from the rest of the world. They were trapped. Elias sprinted toward the trauma bay, where he knew the heavy blast doors offered a second layer of defense. He found Maria there, desperately trying to lock the internal doors. "Maria, where's Dr. Williams?" Maria was shaking, staring past him, toward the cluster of empty exam rooms. He was in 3. He went to restrain the patient before he started the rattling." A sound came from isolation room 3. It wasn't the dry rattling. It was a new sound. A soft, wet snapping, followed by the loud, sharp shatter of glass. Dr. Williams, or what was left of him, stepped out. His body was unrecognizable. The skin had pulled tight over his skull, giving him an eyeless, elongated silhouette. His hands, though, were the worst. The flesh had been replaced by a dense, chitinous shell, and his fingers had fused into 3 massive black clogged digits that snapped open and closed with horrifying precision. This wasn't a virus. It was a rapid parasitic re-engineering of the human body, using the host's own calcium and keratin to create a new armored form. Maria didn't make a sound. She simply dropped the keys. Dr. Williams, the new Dr. Williams, crouched, testing his new frame, and then, with unnatural speed, lunged at Maria. I saw the clawed hands connect and heard Maria's body hit the floor. The new creature paused, standing over her, and then emitted a satisfied, dry, rattling sound. Elias backed away, pressing himself against the sterile surgical supply cabinet. He could feel the familiar onset of the ozone and burned sugar smell on his own skin. He looked down at his arm. A faint gray dust had settled on his white coat. The coat didn't matter.
Beneath the skin of his forearm, he could see a tiny faint ripple, the beginning of a groove. It wasn't a vein, it was a seam, and it was hardening. He was the next host. He couldn't move. The creature that was once Dr. Williams turned its eyeless head toward him, waiting patiently for the transformation to finish. Elias opened his mouth, but instead of air, the only thing that escaped was the sound of 100 tiny glass beads rattling in his throat, welcoming him to the new hive.